Hello, my dear students. Today we are going to explain Chapter 5 to Chapter 10. Chapter 5, Description of the City. Charles Dickens describes the city amazingly because it was a beautiful city. Charles Dickens gives a full description to the city. He said it was a beautiful and colorful city, but now it is a dirty and filthy city because of the Industrial Revolution. It means the ash and the smoke with the black color covered all the buildings. All the buildings in the Cooktown were about red brick, and now because the ash and the smoke, it becomes red and black. Point number two, we have the happiness of Mr. Gradgrind and Mr. Bunderby to see the city in this picture, the face of the savage. Mr. Gradgrind and Mr. Bunderby are walking in the city and they are very happy to see the philosophy of facts is applied in the city, and the philosophy of factories is applied in the city too. So they are very happy to see this ugly picture of the city. The face of the savage is very important. The savage is the person who is not educated and not civilized. Charles Dickens here assimilates the face of the city like the face of the savage. The savage who paints his face with two colors, red and black. Just like the city becomes dirty because of the Industrial Revolution. Point number three, we have the meeting between two teams or two sides, Mr. Gradig and Mr. Bunderby, and the other hand we have Sisi and Bitzer. As we said, while Mr. Gradigrind and Mr. Bunderby were walking in the city, they saw Sisi is running toward them. Bitzer, the boy of facts that Mr. Gradigrind depends on him, followed Sisi. Sisi told Mr. Gradgrind, please, sir, Bitzer is running after me. Mr. Gradgrind asked Bitzer what's wrong, and Bitzer said that Sisi has a bottle of cheap alcohol, but Sisi hold a bottle of nine oils. Nine oils, it is a kind of medicine to her father, Senor Jew. So Mr. Gradgrind didn't believe Sisi and believed Bitzer and tells Sisi to go to meet her father, Senor Jew. Chapter 6. Sisi leads them to her father. Then Gradgrind and Bunderby went with Sisi to meet her father, Senor Jew, in a pub called the Pegasus Arm, where she, her father, and the rest of the Cirques are staying. So the Pegasus Inn is a place. Note that the Cirques people gather at the Pegasus Arm, named after a mythological flying horse, and contrast that to Gradgrind's insistence that his students define the horse only realistically. The clash of the rich and poor people. Sisi went to find her father. Mr. Gradgrind Bunderby wait for them outside, so they meet workers of the Cirques outside. The two workers, the first worker, his name is Mr. E.W.B. Childers and Mr. Kidderminster. Both names are imaginative names, and that makes Mr. Gradgrind humiliates them bitterly, and he is an educated person and they are not. Even the language is not understood between them because the workers are speaking low and slang language. So that again gives Mr. Gradgrind the reason to humiliate them more, that you are walking in the wrong place and you are walking for nothing and aimless. So the clash of the imagination and reality. The imagination, as we said, it is the Pegasus Inn. It is a place. It means a flying horse. The Pegasus means flying horse. and reality of Mr. Gradgrind. So we have irony here that Mr. Gradgrind goes to the place of imagination and meets people of imagination too. So this is the irony here. But he wants to humiliate them in their place. The sadness of Sissy and her father. Her father left her. When she goes to find her father, she didn't find him because he left her, because he can't afford her money to uh, keep studying in the school or to give her a good living. So Mr. Gradgrind in this situation decided to take Cece with him to his own home. By the way, the home of Mr. Gradgrind called Stone Lodge. Stone Lodge is the place of Mr. Gradgrind. So the future of Cece is between Mr. Gradgrind's hand and his place. Chapter 8. Tom and Louisa are discussing their future. Tom is the son of Mr. Gradgrind, as we mentioned before. They are unhappy in their father's home. So Tom and Louisa are discussing their unhappy existence of the education of facts in their father's home. This point leads to the point below, the negative effect of the educational system. Here we can see that Louisa and Tom are not kids anymore, and they are growing up, thinking widely open, and they can feel the negative aspect of the education of facts or the educational system, as Mr. Gradgrind mentioned in the first chapter when he said, feed them with the philosophy of facts. Though, so Tom and Louisa feels the difference and the negative effect. Point number 3, we have the marriage of Louisa and Wonderboy. She doesn't love him, she doesn't want to marry him. Why? Because he is older than her and he just like her father. She doesn't want to leave her the hell in the Mr. Gradgrind home and to go in the another kind of hell of Mr. Wonderboy. But unfortunately, her father forces her to marry Mr. Wonderboy. I mean later. Chapter 9, Cece's progress. It means she cannot learn the philosophy of facts. As we know now, Cece is living with Mr. Gradgrind in his home. So Mr. Gradgrind is doing his best to teach her the facts, but Cece didn't learn the facts because she is a sensitive girl, and this is a suffering of Cece in his home. Cece tells Louisa about her past life, the misery of her parents' life. Cece and Louisa are talking to each other, and Cece starts telling Louisa about the life of her father and her mother, and how did her mother die, and her father left her. And she told her that her parents loved her too much. So this sensitive speaking from Cece has his impact and effect on Louisa. Why? Because Louisa now feels that is her father didn't treat her like Cece's father. So here we have an irony. Louisa, the rich woman and the powerful woman, now she feels weak and feels sorry because her father didn't treat her softly before, just like Cece's father. Gradgrind didn't give the love for Louisa as a girl like Cece's father. So here we can say that Louisa turns from a woman of facts into a woman of imagination. Let's say this is the first step to turn Louisa from the situation of facts into a situation of imagination. So this is the misery of her parents' life. Cece lived suffered situations, suffered events in the past, and now her misery and her suffering is growing up more and more because she is living in Mr. Gradgrind home. Number three, showing the cruelty of Mr. Gradgrind. The cruelty of Mr. Gradgrind as a man who wants to teach her the philosophy, but she didn't receive this philosophy. And from another side, the cruelty of Mr. Gradgrind with his daughter Louisa, who didn't give her the love she wanted. Chapter 10, Stephen Blackpool is a new character in the novel, is a worker who works in Banderby's factory and a poor man. Blackpool is a very important character also in this novel because he represented the image of the poor workers in the mine in the Victorian age that depicted by Charles Dickens. Point number two, his wife and Rachel. His wife, she has no name because it wasn't mentioned her name in the novel, is a filthy and dirty woman, and they don't love each other. Blackpool is in love with Rachel, the respectful and beautiful woman that he loved her. But according to the Christianity, and you know that the man can't marry two women at the same time. But the religion in the Victorian age is corrupted. When the rich man wants to do something, he will go to the religious man to give him money, and the religious man gives him the permission to do whatever he wants, just like our time. Number three, he suffers psychologically, physically, and socially. He suffered psychologically because his works from day and night in the factory with Mr. Banderby, sorry, and gives him a little money. Physically, his body is weak. He is very a skinny man and a skinny body. Socially, his life, the society doesn't respect Blackpool. They hate him, they humiliate him, and they consider him as an outsider. So the outsider, as we mentioned before, he is unaccepted in the society.